Good morning. It's the Friday before the return of domestic football for Celtic after the international break, a fairly successful international break for Scotland. But now it's back to club football. Sean and Alison, Ross County coming to Celtic Park tomorrow. And what has quickly at this stage of the season, Sean, already become a must-win game, or to channel Callum McGregor, must not lose, depending on what way you look at it.
Don't get me started on that again. I think it is. I think. Me and Tony spoke about it a couple of times. I think it's very important that Celtic put together a winning run. I suppose I've done a piece today looking at the Ross County game and looking at the kind of how they're almost getting to the bogey team stage, because apart from Rangers, obviously, I think Ross County have got the best recent record against Celtic in the last handful. Last 3 games they've won 2, and despite Celtic's poor season last year, there's no such record against any of the other teams in the league. So I think Ross County will be hoping that the kind of recent history repeats itself. And I think Celtic will want to. It's obviously not a marker because it's Ross County at the end of the day. That's not your direct challengers, but it is important that they get a win and it kickstarts a winning run, preferably a lengthy one.
Alison, yeah, Sean's right there. Celtic were beaten by Ross County 1-0 towards the Taylor end of last season. Also knocked out the cup by County at the end of last year, in November I think it was. So although Celtic over the last 10 years have been able to take care of County pretty reasonably with not too much trouble, when it starts to build up like this in short-term memory, it could maybe sometimes play on the mind of players. But I think to oppose that, this is a fairly new squad that have not had to deal with it.
I think from a player and squad's perspective, it's really just about going back and trying to get back to winning ways after the defeat to Rangers at Ibrox. That feels like a long time ago now, given the length of time and the fact that international football then took precedence. I think it'll just be about going out and trying to win the game. I think you can't get caught up in too much of the backstory. I think you can't afford to think too much about things like that. And you're right, I think there's a fresh perspective when you have so many players who have come into the club who are essentially untainted by the events of last season, and you could include the manager in that too. So I think from Celtic's point of view, it'll be about going out, trying to cope without the loss of players. We've learned this morning that it looks as though Kyogo Furuhashi is carrying a knock and could be out for a substantial period of time. We might know more after the press conference this afternoon, but I think it'll really be just about 3 points on the board and a focus now towards trying to build some kind of momentum.
Yeah, we don't know much about the injury to Furuhashi yet, do we? We just are taken from what happened the other night that it might be some sort of knee issue, but there's been no release at all on that so far.
No, there's not been any confirmation, but there's been a couple of reports today suggesting that sources in Asia, I think that he might not be ready for Japan's next international game, which would suggest he's out for at least a handful of games for Celtic, but it's not confirmed yet as far as I'm aware. As I said yesterday, I think Postecoglou will be asked that pretty sharpish.
Yeah, well, that would be a massive blow, really, considering the way that he's slotted into life at Celtic. The remedy for that, I suppose, would be if Jota's fit on the left and Giakoumakis through the middle, Alison, the 2 new boys straight into the team if Kyogo's injured.
Without question, I think it exposes actually the lack of depth within the squad, which we actually have referenced already. But I think it only takes that. So I think we'd spoken last month about the possibility of needing 2 strikers had Lee Griffiths gone out on loan as he did, and Odsonne-Edouard has left the club. So I think all of a sudden you look very threadbare when it comes to options when you're without a key player. Like you, that's what I would expect would happen, purely because necessity will be the mother of invention. I think if Furuhashi's out, I think it will be, a debut for Giakoumakis and Jota. I think they will come in. I'm not sure about James Forrest, whether or not he's up and running. I know he was quite close for the Rangers game and then didn't make it. I don't know if he's in a position to come back in too, but I think it does show that Celtic are light when it comes to options, and I think he'll be a huge loss. It does come to pass that he's out for a month or possibly longer. He could be missing 7 games potentially. I think he would be huge. And it's not just the goals. I think that Kyogo brought to Celtic, I think, 7 goals in 11 games or something like that. But it's the influence that he's had on everyone around him. I think it's the lift he gave everyone. I think it's his movement. I think it's been his ability to create something from nothing. I think that would be hugely missed by Celtic.
Got a comment here talking about depth. Ajeti can stake his claim. Sean, any chance of that if Kyogo's unfit for this weekend?
I think there is a chance. I would suggest maybe not from the start. I think he'd maybe be more likely to go with his new signing. But there is always a chance. It depends what he's shown in training. If Ange thinks that he's shown enough to merit that start, given that he's only made really substitute appearances, pre-season aside, then you never know. He could give him the chance.
What about in defence? Do you think there's any chance, Alison, that Carter Vickers could be immediately thrown in alongside either Welsh or Starfelt, or is the smart money on keeping the two of them together?
I think my gut feeling is that he'll keep the two of them together for now. I'm not sure how it might progress over the long term, but I think he might go with the two of them for this game. I think Stephen Welsh hasn't done much wrong in recent weeks. I think he's grown since the arrival of Ange Postecoglou. I think he looks a bit more settled. He looks a lot more composed and more confident. I think he might stay in, and I think he'll stick with Carl Starfelt for now.
Sean, I think that's probably the way that it'll go. Starfelt, as we've spoken about before, he's had a sticky start to life at Celtic, but needs to be given the chance to put forward the form and find a run that is going to make him a mainstay of the Celtic team. And as Alison references, Welsh has been pretty solid, really, the whole season. There'd be no merit in him being dropped from the team.
I agree. I don't think Carter Vickers will go straight in. I think I've mentioned it a couple of times this week. He had an ankle injury last month. He might not throw him right in, but regardless, I don't think he would. I think he'll stick with Starfelt and Welsh together. I know they lost the last game, but I think Welsh has done well since getting in the team. And I think Starfelt, despite his quite frequent shaky moments, I think that Rangers game was actually his best game in a Celtic top. So I don't see the rationale in dropping him after that if you're going to stick with him after the kind of shaky start, which obviously he rightly did.
What about the left back then? Because Greg Taylor had that wee injury suffered against Alkmaar, wasn't it? So I suppose then with Ralston and flying on the right side, does Juranovic fill in on the left again, or does Scales come in for a start, Sean?
If Greg Taylor's fit, I think Greg Taylor starts. I think he goes back in. I think the real debate would be right back. I think Juranovic had a decent debut, especially considering the circumstances, to straight in at Ibrox with no Celtic fans there. I think he'd done well. But Ralston has been really good the last 6-7 weeks, whatever it's been. So I suppose this is the time we're going to see if what we've kind of been suggesting, that if a right back came in, it was Ralston's jersey to lose. I suppose this is when we start seeing if that is the case.
Alison, what does your instinct tell you on the right back situation? Because Celtic have brought in someone here that is expected to be in that position for some time, but the only option that Celtic had so far this season is proved that he's up to the task.
I agree. I think it might be harsh on Anthony Ralston, I would have to say, but my suspicion is that Juranovic might go in and start at right back on Saturday. I just think I thought he impressed at Ibrox. I thought he acquitted himself very well, playing on the opposite side of his favoured position, and I think it made quite a compelling case for him to start. I do think it's tough on Anthony Ralston. I think we've spoken about it often these past few weeks, about how he's emerged and how his character has really emerged in what was a very difficult time for him. But I'm going to put my money in Juranovic, I think, for Ross County.
Sean, what about the midfield? Because I think it's probably safe to assume that as long as Callum McGregor, club captain, is fit, he'll play as the sole pivot. David Turnbull has been very popular under Ange Postecoglou as well. He didn't really play much with Scotland over the international break, so he should be ready to go in one of the positions in front of McGregor. But the other one, do you think it will be Rogic or someone else? Because Rogic has just come back from the other side of the world after playing 2 games for Australia, he might be feeling fairly sluggish or needing a wee bit of rest after this one to try and keep him fresh for the Betis game. Do you know if there's anyone else there that you think might take precedence over Rogic in that position?
I think you've made a good point. I think, first of all, yes, McGregor will start as long as he's fit, which he touch wood always is. Played the full 90 in 2 of Scotland's 3 matches, and I think he played about half an hour in the other one. So even that 60 minutes, I says it using earlier in the week, even that 60 minutes of a rest will be beneficial. Yeah. I think Turnbull, in the opposite to McGregor, only played about 15 minutes across those 3 games, so he'll be rested. But you're right to mention Rogic. He's travelled, I think, to Qatar and Vietnam and back in the past week. Played 90 minutes in both of the games, which I think we know for Rogic, you don't necessarily always get the full 90 minutes out of him. So to have played twice on the other side of the world in the past week and travelled back, there is every chance that he's maybe needing maybe an appearance for the bench rather than from the start. If he is to be on the bench, then you're probably looking at Ismaila Soro or James McCarthy if he's fit. So it would be interesting to see what he goes for, I would say.
Would that not change the dynamic of the midfield, though, bringing in one of those two? Would McGregor then be pushed forward alongside Turnbull, and McCarthy or Soro would be the deeper one?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what would happen. I think there's not as much as McGregor's been.
Yeah, I actually think that is what he'll do.
Yeah. Do you think he'll be Soro? Do you mean?
Yeah, I think he might play Soro in a deeper position and then play McGregor and Turnbull just slightly further on.
You've got to remember who the opponents are as well. Like, as much as I've just said, Ross County are almost a bogey team. It's Celtic at Parkhead in front of a full house at 3 o'clock on a Saturday. Like, as much as playing Soro would ordinarily be seen as a defensive move, if it's to give Rogic the kind of maybe a rest that he needs, and it also unleashes Callum McGregor further forward, we kind of forget, because we're concentrating on how much he keeps the play ticking over, how effective he actually is going forward. He's very talented when it comes to the final third. It's almost a victim of his own qualities that he kind of has to sit deeper and take the ball quite often. So you could do it. You could do it whether it's McCarthy or Soro. If McGregor goes further forward, I wouldn't be surprised to see him on the score sheet again in Saturday.
Like County, I've had a really, really rough ride from the fixture computer, right? So the first game was against St Johnstone, and then they had Hibs, Rangers, Aberdeen, now Celtic, and the next game after that is Hearts, right? So, I mean, really, really hard opening 6 fixtures to the season. They've not won yet, but they've got 2 points from those games, which I think, relatively speaking, is a fairly decent return because of the difficulty of the fixtures, right? And they gave Rangers a wee scare, although Rangers saw the game out 4-2. But County seem to be fairly decent on the break, and they do not have much possession at all. They had 35% or so possession against Rangers and had 5 shots on target. They had even less than that possession against Aberdeen and still had 5 shots on target. So Celtic, even though they are at home, Sean, and we need to take the circumstances of the game into the equation, Celtic can't really switch off here or allow themselves to nap when County have proven over the last couple of games that they can hurt teams that are better than them.
Aye, I don't think the Celtic defence can afford to switch off at all in any game, because it will be exposed at some stage because of the tactics and stuff. I think you're right to mention the difficulty of County's fixture list so far. It almost masks that all right, they've not won a game in the first 4 games, but the fact that they've drawn with Aberdeen and St Johnstone, I mean, even just taking those 2 results, that's decent for Ross County. Yes, they lost to Rangers, but they still scored twice. I don't think they are as bad as no wins in 4 would suggest.
Yeah, and Alison, they've got some players in there that hurt Celtic last season. As Sean mentioned, they've got Big Jordan White up front, who was a handful to deal with. They've added Alex Samuel, a new striker, as well this week. I wonder if he'll go straight into the team. But there are players there that Celtic can't afford to take lightly, I suppose, would be the way to put it.
Yeah, I agree with Sean. I think at the minute you need Celtic's defence switched on at all times, and I think you anticipate the way that Celtic are playing just now, there are always going to be gaps defensively and holes in behind, but I think it would do the defence a world of good, maybe just to get a few clean sheets, just to try and find some solidity and some consistency going forward, because we know it's been an Achilles heel for so long, especially when it comes to set pieces. I think it's something it's an area that we all know has needed work and has needed surgery. And I think the longer you can go with building a solid backline, I think the more confidence it gives throughout the team as a whole. I think the way Celtic play might make that very difficult, but I think certainly you want to bring in something that just gives some confidence throughout the whole team that you know you're fairly solid when teams are coming in behind you.
Right. Well, we'll see what happens then tomorrow. I think we were right to recognise at the start that anything apart from a win here for Celtic will certainly flatten the atmosphere, I think, around an exciting start to the season as it has been so far, but it has to be turned back into winning ways after the last league game against Rangers, and given that Hearts already have beaten Celtic this season and they play Hibs at the weekend, they could stretch potentially a lead even further at the top of the table. So yeah, Celtic in dire need of 3 points tomorrow. Alison, Sean, thanks for joining me. We'll see what happens.
Cheers, Andy.
Thank you.